Happy New Year, brand nerds. At the top of the year, we're back at you with another episode of our beloved podcast. We love this podcast, Brands, Beats, and Bytes. This is album 6, LT, our 6th year doing this. And while this is track 2, it is the first guest of the year. So the person kicking off the year, brand nerds, who's a brand nerd himself, we are about to drop this one on you. So LT, can you believe that we are into year 6?
It's crazy.
Man, like year 6. All right, so LT, we have a trifecta here today. And it's not often that we have a trifecta in our guest. Number one, he is a brilliant marketer, talented, highly advanced marketing mind. So that's one that we have. The second is we have someone, LT, who has given us an opportunity. He actually invited us to a university, which is going to come up later, to do our first recording of Brands, Beats, and Bytes live in front of an audience. So that's the second thing. And the third one, which may be most important, LT and brand nerds, you guys will be familiar with this. When you're working and you go from company to company or from group to group inside of these different companies, you will find folks who are really good at their jobs, but quite frankly, many of them are butt munches. Okay.
Do you have a definition for butt munch?
Yeah, it's a fancy way to say a-hole. Okay, you just find that in over the course of your career, and a lot of them are also politically adept. So they may or may not be great at producing results, but they are phenomenal at producing political wins. Our next guest is nothing like that.
Yep.
And he was in a place with us, you'll talk about this, Larry, where there were political sharks swimming all over the tank, all over the aquarium, all over the ocean. This dude is a great human being.
Yes.
Just a great human being. So when you combine a brilliant marketing mind with someone who's giving, and his giving showed up for us in giving us the opportunity to do our podcast in front of marketing students. And then thirdly, who's also just a really, really good human. It just has me excited to think about how fortunate we are to start our year off with this person. LT, who do we have in the building with us today?
Oh, DC, we have Tim Halloran in the house today. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me. That's quite an intro, DC. My mom would be very proud, so thank you.
It's about to get better, Tim.
Oh, Tim, we're just getting started.
It's about to get better.
That's right. And brand nerds out there, this is not an accident that we have Tim leading off the year, as DC suggested, as our first guest of the year. We don't do that accidentally. We save that spot for special folks, and Tim is a special person. So we're gonna Tim, this is just starting, bud. You're gonna really find this one interesting. Your mom's going to really like this, I think. So, okay, brand nerds. This one is, as DC sort of alluded to, another Coca-Cola alum. And trust us, brand nerds, we only bring you the best ones. Tim is currently a marketing professor at the prestigious Georgia Institute of Technology, better known as Georgia Tech. More details to follow. So let's walk you through Tim's stellar background to show you his full path. So Tim grew up in Florida and attended Washington and Lee University in Virginia, earning a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Accounting, and where he's on the swim team and manages to graduate cum laude. He then goes to the University of Georgia Terry School of Business, where he earns a master's in market research, which, by the way, is the strongest market research program in the country. In the country, that's right. He also works as an intern at AC Nielsen. Brand nerds, for those of you who don't know, is one of the largest and most prestigious research companies in the world. So guess what account is part of Tim's internship, brand nerds? It is Coca-Cola, and specifically Powerade. Dee and Tim, I am not sure if I have told either one of you the full background and what happens here, but I will share it on this podcast. We had been looking for an assistant brand manager for Powerade. For me, it seemed at the time like we had been looking forever. We had interviewed numerous people, and we could just not find someone that was the right fit. So, Tim, you may have to correct me on some of the details. My recollection is you and I had been working together on Nielsen-based research analytics. And Dee, candidly, I was really impressed with this dude and thought to myself, gee, I wonder if Tim would be interested in brand management, since Brand Nerds, he was at the tail end of earning his master's in market research. So one day we were on the phone and I said to Tim, hey, would you be interested in working on our brand team? My recollection was he enthusiastically said yes. So Brand Nerds, this is the key. I was already working with Tim, and because he was doing a great job with our research and analytics work, even though that this was brand management, but for me, the research and analytics work is foundational for all great brands. Because of that, I was super confident Tim would walk into the job and help us from day one. Tim, I don't know if you know this, but there was lots of lobbying behind the scenes to get you on the team versus those that were inquiring, gee, why should we have a research guy join brand management? Well, those of us who were lobbying for him, we won. Guess what, Brand Nerds? Tim was awesome from day one, and for 10 plus years in Coca-Cola brand management, working on brands such as Powerade, of course, and also Diet Coke, Nestea, and also where he and his team developed Gold Peak Tea, which is now a $1 billion brand. Things work quite well for all, I think, Dee, don't you think, for Tim joining Coca-Cola and brand management?
Okay, so LT, I did not know this story, brother. I did not know. You kept this in the bag. This is a good one.
Yeah. So Tim's laughing. So after leaving Coca-Cola, Tim enters academia and consulting. He becomes a marketing professor at Emory University's Goizueta School of Business, where he teaches both undergrads and grads brand management, and also develops and teaches a grad level course called New Product Lab. Additionally, he starts consulting company Brand Illumination, enabling clients to better understand the relationship between their brand and target consumer, leveraging this knowledge into strategic marketing recommendations that strengthen this bond. At this point, Tim then decides to obtain his doctorate in marketing from the University of Florida Warrington School of Business and completes his dissertation on the impact of consumer engagement in social media brand communities on brand purchase frequency. So we got a doctor in the house. As mentioned earlier, Dr. Halloran then joins the esteemed faculty at Georgia Tech, where he teaches both undergrads and grads in brand management, market research, and also serves as the faculty director for the executive MBA program. Of course, with Tim's great success working in the real world, he's able to provide his students. And Tim, can we call your students brand nerds? I think we can, right?
Sure, plenty of them are. Absolutely.
Okay. He's providing his students, because of his amazing background, an education second to none. So lastly, Tim is also a published author, having written the great book, Romancing the Brand. Brand Nerds, this is a fantastic book. And if you are interested in furthering your brand education, you need to go get this. We have been looking forward to this one for a long time. Welcome to Brands, Beats, and Bytes, Tim Halloran.
Wow. Thank you, LT. I appreciate it. And Daryl, this is great. DC, and you guys are we'll talk, I'm sure, about this, but it's a thrill to kind of be with you guys. You guys are always two that have some stories, plenty of stories, coach type stories, right? That I admired and were just like, wow, these guys, and I love what you're doing with this. It's a fantastic just media vehicle, I think, for all of us that are so interested in the latest and greatest in terms of what's going on with branding, what's going on with marketing, technology. And we loved having you here at Tech, and we want to have you back. So we're going to figure out, well, we'll talk offline on that, get you guys back.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Again, because that was a really well-received event, and we'll do it.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Hey, Dee, before you get into the get comfy, did you know the background, Tim, that I ever told you that?
I knew, I mean, obviously I knew, it's funny. I was talking and thinking about this, the different paths that we all take in our careers, right? And the little steps that you don't think is a big deal at the time, but turns out to be huge, right? I mean, if I take this little Nielsen internship coming out of UGA, and I just happened to be put on the Coke account. I just happened to be working with you on Powerade, of all the places I could have gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
You just happen to be needing an assistant brand manager at the time. So, it really is remarkable sometimes how there really is this, I feel like, this grand plan in place, and you don't
Yes.
realize it as you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, Tim, I'm so glad you said that. And D, I'll shut up in a second, but because
No, go.
this is really important. Brand nerds, you got to control everything you can. So you got to be the best you can be. So when the opportunity does present itself, you take advantage of it like Tim, but you got to be lucky too. You got to be lucky too. But when you're lucky, you got to seize it.
Yeah. I am blown away by this story. And as long as I've known you, Tim, and Larry, I mean, I've known you both for 30 years approaching, if not that, to not have known this story. So I've had a relationship with Tim for many years, independent of you, Larry. I've had a relationship with you for many years, Larry, independent of Tim. And I knew you all worked together, but I didn't know in superhero parlance, the origin story.
Right.
I did not know the origin story. So great segue into Get Comfy. So normally, Tim, we have one question in the Get Comfy section, but in this case, I've got two. And one relates to how this quote unquote just so happened to be in an internship with Nielsen, just so happened to have Coca-Cola as a client, just so happened to have Larry looking for a brand manager, assistant brand manager on Powerade. When you were taking up your research master's degree at UGA, what were you thinking was going to be your next step after grad school before you met Larry?
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I wish I had been so precise to have my whole plan kind of outlined. And I got to be honest with you, I got interested in that program because I worked in my undergrad. You mentioned Washington Lee, which is a small liberal arts school with a small little business school kind of attached to it. I worked very closely with the marketing professor there, and there's only one. There was only one. And really started getting interested. I helped him write a case. So that was kind of my first foray into kind of the academic kind of thing. Is we wrote a case on a local, you wouldn't know this, but if you ever know these, it's a local Virginia company that makes these mailboxes with different nature scenes on them and stuff.
Okay.
You might have seen them. Anyway, we wrote a case for them, and I was like, and we did a lot of research, kind of just consumer surveys and focus groups, and that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really find this interesting. And so I was the time that I had to go and either think through getting an MBA or getting the specialized degree in marketing research at Georgia. And it was a really, at that point, very lucrative program. It was like one of these things that gave you a scholarship, you didn't pay any tuition.
Wow.
I was like, you know what? It's a little, it's the equivalent today with like a master's of science, with right. And a specialized master's is what it is. And I thought, you know what, I like the marketing research piece, but I really, it was the best option for me at the time. And so it's kind of jumped into it. And I thought, going out of it, I thought I wanted to work at a big company. I didn't know in research, there's the suppliers, which are like the Nielsen people.
Yeah.
And then there are the clients, which are your P&Gs and Cokes and that kind of stuff who kind of get the information. So I kind of knew I wanted to go on the client side, but the idea of going into brand management, I kind of had a taste of it. Larry, I don't know if you remember this, but what we were working on? Again, funny that you remember this. We were working on Gatorade had come out with a sports bottle at the time.
Yes.
Right. It was a 20-ounce push-pull, had a push-pull top. And Larry was getting all kinds of heat from Coca-Cola management about, hey, you need to figure this out. What's going on? So LT was calling me and basically saying, hey, help us figure out what's going on here. And that really opened my eyes into some pretty interesting things that we were doing and analyzing. And so I kind of, brought to the table the fact that, hey, here's what was going on with the Gatorade sports bottle, and maybe here's some things we need to think about if we're Powerade.
I totally forgot that until you just, that was I didn't remember what the project was until you just said it. And by the way, brand nerds, we came out with a Powerade. Remember, Tim, and this is when you came on the team, we came out with a sports bottle that was much better than theirs. Funny enough.
Oh, he's gonna pull it down.
That's right.
Ah,
Remember that thing? It had the little, you can't get it. My thing is messed up. You can get, it's got this
that's
little
all right.
top, and it was kind of this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Haley, you're gonna have to show that when we share this.
Power flow is what we ended up calling it.
Oh, that's right. I remember Power Flow. I remember Power Flow. Okay. All right. So didn't know that background either. So brand nerds, especially those at Georgia Tech, as you listen to this, I hope some of you all listen to this. What I'm gaining, Tim, from your story is you didn't have necessarily a grand plan when you were in graduate school of, I'm going to go to the Coca-Cola company and work on Powerade and meet this guy named Larry. So you didn't have that plan. But what you were doing is you were operating at the top of your game as well as you could during the internship and handling this client. And because of your dedication and your skill, Larry noticed it. So brand nerds, even sometimes when you're not paying attention, other people are. Yep. And these other people can unlock opportunities that you have not fathomed. So that's a great story, Tim. I'm going to my second question now.
Okay.
When in school, whether you are in undergrad, grad school, or some doctoral program, we find professors who are really good, Tim and Larry. They're really good. However, their entire experience is on the academic side. Now, they're good. They're good. They're going to teach some stuff. You're going to learn, and you're going to be able to go out into the world and do wonderful things. We've all had those professors.
Yep.
But every now and again, you get a professor like Tim, who has actually built brands and businesses, who was actually saying, okay, Gold Peak, what kind of brand is that? It's $1 billion brand. Okay, Gold Peak. So we have some folks that did that first and then went into academia, and they bring both of these things forward to teach students and brand nerds. And so this question, Tim, is not to diminish one or another, but just your perspective on having both experiences on the corporate side and the academic side, and how you see that impacting your ability to teach your students.
Right. No, I think that is great. And you're right. There are two very different tracks in the academic world for anyone who's ever thinking about going out there, is that you have the traditional, as you say, DC, the research types. And I almost kind of think they're brilliant. And they're the ones that come up, the stuff you read in the textbooks.
Yeah.
They come up with the thoughts behind, the theories that land in the textbooks. Mm-hmm. But then you have a whole practitioner side, as you say, and these folks are all about the ones that have been there. I can bring in this lesson from, and I know my students get tired of Coca-Cola stories, but I mean, they're fun, right? Because everybody can relate to Coca-Cola.
Absolutely.
So we bring in Coca-Cola stories, or I bring in a story from a firm I'm consulting with, or an issue that someone may be having, and you throw it out there because this is what's relevant and this is what's common to them right now, and they can relate to it. So it works both ways. I bring in, and I bring in some of my clients to talk to students. So it does work in a nice synergistic kind of way.
Oh yeah. Dee, I'm glad you brought that up, because in my experience, I was very lucky to have a great MBA education, University of North Carolina, Keenan Flagler School. Shout out to them. It was amazing. But I remember two marketing professors in particular, and I'll shout out one, Professor Klumpmaker, interesting name. And he worked. He had a great corporate career like Tim before. And you knew as a 20-something in my mid-20s, you knew what he was saying was actually something that was already considerate of the real world, as I thought. Whereas there was another marketing professor, great guy, nice guy, brilliant. But when he talked and he would use examples, he'd go, that doesn't smell right. And he never had he never had worked. He was an academia person. And even as a 20-something, you can smell that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll just add on to that, LT. I mean, the idea is that the textbook only gets you so far, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of realism that they don't teach you in the textbook.
Yep.
That you have to say, yes, this works in this kind of situation, but what happens if this is your situation?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I've got an analog to describe this. I'm going to call it double P's: professorial and practitioner, and how these things go together. In our business, Tim, we talk about ourselves as practitioners because we are.
Sure.
And one of the things we do is we teach marketers how to become better marketers, and we describe it analogistically as a car, teaching someone how to drive a car. Now, when I grew up, Tim and LT, this is how you got your learner's permit and then your license. You're in high school and you go to a class.
Yep.
And in the class, the teacher talks with you about all of the things that have to do with the laws of the road and what it's like to drive a car. And then the teacher shows these pictures and it has lanes and turn signals and signs and all of that. So all of this happens in the classroom. And everyone, before they got a learner's permit, you start off in the classroom. Okay, so he was like a professor. Then everyone's looking forward to getting in the car on the road. And when I was learning how to drive, and I suspect you too, Tim and LT, you got on the side of the steering wheel with the pedals, and then the driving instructor had a brake. Okay, you have a steering wheel, had a brake. And so what happened is I'm driving along and I'm thinking about, okay, what did he say about left turn lane and right away and that kind of stuff? And then I'm like, oh, I think I got it. And all of a sudden, he hits that brake. He hits that brake. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And the point was that he had become a practitioner for me, which allowed me to become a better driver, thereby getting my learner's permit and getting my license. That's you, Tim. It's like you have the ability to talk with your students about theories, which are great, behind some of the greatest activations in marketing. And then you're able to then talk about it from the perspective of a practitioner who's done it. So your students are lucky. The university is lucky.
Yes.
Our marketing community, we are fortunate to have you, brother.
Well, thank you. And we always like to, one of the things I also make sure is part of most of my classes is we bring in real world projects that we let them kind of get their teeth, right? Get their hands dirty. Yep. I mean,
nice.
At a minimum, we do simulations, but most of the time we'll bring in some real world projects to where they can kind of, hey, here's a current issue that this company's having. Tell them what they need to be doing. And I think that's the best kind of experience you can get.
All right. So we'll talk. I'm sorry, Larry. Go ahead, brother.
No, I say no question. Right. D, that's Tim's example of your driver's ed class, right?
Absolutely. So I'm going to offer this now. We'll do this offline. The same thing you said earlier, Tim. Thanks for extending an invitation for us to come back. But if you would like for Larry and I to participate with your students in some of this real world getting their hands dirty, and we find some way to make that a part of the podcast, we're down. I'm just saying it right now. We're down.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about it. That would be fun. Absolutely.
It would be.
All right. We are going to the next section, brand nerds, and we call that 5 questions. So, Tim, here's what happens. I ask a question, Larry asks a question. We go back and forth until we arrive at 5. Now, given your experience, I cannot wait to hear your answer to this question. I'm looking forward to this, brother. All right, so take yourself back, Tim, to a time where you engaged with a brand and it was the first time that a brand captivated your attention, had you excited. It got into your soul. You could not spend enough time with this brand. If you spent 15 minutes, you thought with the brand and oh, wow, I've been thinking about this for an hour. I thought it was just 15 minutes. You really had a passion for this brand, almost like it was your first love. What was this brand for you, Tim?
I was thinking about this and I got to go back. Larry mentioned I grew up in Florida, right? and literally in Central Florida, right near on the Space Coast, are about 45 minutes away from Orlando, which meant I was about 45 minutes away from Walt Disney World. So as a kid, we would go over there. Right? I mean, this is for a lot of people, it's a once in a lifetime or once in a childhood kind of thing. My kids have been a couple times, but like when I was a kid, I mean, we would go over there, and that was really the idea of this magical experience for me, and realizing, and that cascaded, and the idea of experiential marketing and just feeling almost the 360-degree experience that a brand would have. And that kind of started with that, and then it evolved to, I could go back and we would go to football games at the Orange Bowl in Miami, and you would see the Dolphins and that experience and that environment. My first baseball game, we didn't have baseball teams in Florida back then. We drove up one year to the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. And you see the Braves, and you go and you walk through that tunnel and you see the green of the field. So I think, I'm kind of stretching it a little bit, but there's your definition, but there's this experience that I've felt, this idea of being surrounded and so many different touch points. This is what I teach in my classes about how to really make it work. You're hitting them in multiple ways. We go back to third grade, or not kindergarten, I guess, when you learn about the five senses. And great brands, I feel like, can really hit you at all five of those senses: sight, taste, touch, smell. What's the last one? Touch? What did I say? Hearing, I guess. So that's kind of, that's where I'm going kind of with that is the idea of, these brands created, I'm big in terms of relationships, right? Brand consumer relationships, and how strongly the experience was for me, whether it is Disney World, the Atlanta Braves, the old Orange Bowl, and the Miami Dolphins. I was sold for life. And I think that might be some of the impressions of an 8-year-old. But it really, and I really found just the product experience so fascinating.
Ooh, I love that.
I do too, Larry. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, well, I love where Tim is going, brand nerds, about the experiential part, because that's where it's all encompassing, and it really envelops you, right? That's the way you took us back to the Orange Bowl and Disney World, and walking into, the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. And that's where, like you said, Tim, the optimal level of brand is when you can get people to feel on all five senses, right? You can't always do that. Sometimes some folks overreach, like MasterCard having a money smell. That doesn't work, right?
No.
It's got to be authentic. And so all the things that Tim alluded to were incredibly authentic.
All right. Cart, horse, cart question.
Okay.
So Disney, you're in Central Florida. You're 45 minutes from Disney. You talked about the magical experience and the five senses and being surrounded. Did you have a love for the Disney brand before you went and experienced everything that you experienced? Or did you have just a tepid connection to the Disney brand, and then once you had the magical experiences, you were like, oh, this is everything? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, obviously you knew it, and you knew Mickey Mouse, and you knew these Disney movies and that kind of stuff. But but it was less connected, right? That connection happens when you get and have a tangible experience, in my mind, a positive, tangible experience with the brand itself. And I totally hear. I mean, the authenticity is so part of everything, and the realism. So there's plenty of examples, right? But as you said, the MasterCard, the money. If things are not authentic and real and trustworthy, then that just falls flat. It all has to kind of fit together.
That is so good. I want to do one quick follow on and then go to the next question. But Larry, any response to what Tim just said?
I'm tracking.
All right. So the brand nerds, our brand nerds, sometimes I think they get tired of us using Coca-Cola examples as well, but we use them because they work. Because they work. I'm going to use a metric now that Tim will be very familiar with, as will you, LT. And the metric is called virtual consumption. And so when we would do our analysis, one of our panels had to do with people stating how much they thought they'd consumed. That was typically above what they actually consumed. So when we would compare it to like retail data to what people stated, there was a delta.
It never matched.
Yeah, okay. And so that so there you go. And so that's exactly. So that delta, we refer to that as virtual consumption. And so I've always thought of that in those terms. But listening to your answer about Disney, Tim, you knew about Disney. So you were consuming it, but you hadn't made it to the parks yet. You had not made it to the park. So there was some degree of virtual consumption that was happening and what you thought it would be like. And then once you got all those touch points, that delta got closed.
Yep.
That delta got closed. And then you were really able to fully embrace this brand. I've never thought about virtual consumption in that way until, Tim, you just said what you said.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's opportunity, right? And it's making what you see and hear about and make it come to life. And I think that's what it does.
Yeah. One last thing. By the way, brand nerds, just like it can go positive, it can also go negative.
Yep.
So Tim and his family show up and Mickey Mouse is running them out with a pitchfork. Okay. That's not helping them out. All right.
It wasn't like Chevy Chase on the original Vacation.
Oh. That's good.
Wally World.
All right, LT.
Wally
Next
World.
question, brother.
Exactly.
So yeah, question 2, Tim. So who has had or is having the most influence on your career?
Well, we've already talked about one person, and that's the guy I'm looking at, Larry Taman, who really, again, like I said, it's amazing little things that you don't realize impact, right? I don't work on Powerade. I don't work with you on that. I don't get hired by Coke. I don't spend the next 10 plus years there. I don't, you have all these great stories that I translate into the book. It's amazing to me. And I would just tell your folks out there that your listeners that don't ever ignore little things, right? I mean, because that one little thing, that one little door, that extra door that you knock on, hey, it may be the one, right? Or that one path you can potentially take, it may be the one. So I think you really got to know yourself and know what you like and know what you're passionate about. And I think the fact that I have a huge interest in sports, and the fact that Powerade was sports and marketing. And oh, by the way, Tim, we're going to leverage the 1996 Olympic Games that we're the official sports drink. We're going to use that to launch this brand nationally. I mean, it's like, okay, let's go. It really wasn't. It was not a real hard decision, to be perfectly honest with you. But over time, I mean, I've had a lot of, I think, I will say just a more recent example is my graduate advisor at Florida was great. I mean, I was making this big transition and I made a conscious choice. And you mentioned that I worked at Emory and worked and taught one class there. It became multiple classes and was basically full-time on Emory. But then at one day, the guy, a person in the department said, Tim, we're kind of changing direction with the department and you and another person that taught consumer behavior. We're moving much more into analytics. We're going away from branding and consumer behavior or taking a step back from that. So we're going to offer fewer classes in that. And so thank you very much. And we'll have you move on. And that, it was the classic example. I could have been like Florida State. Not to use a bad analogy here.
Oh, Tim, easy.
Maybe that's not a good example.
No, you're right. It's actually a very good example. It is.
So I could have been like just all upset about it and just I'm done with academia. But you know what? I really like teaching. It was really something to me that I was passionate about. And I was like, how am I gonna change that? How am I gonna put myself in a situation where they just can't willy-nilly get rid of me? And the doctorate, what I have is a doctorate of business administration, a DBA, which is a practitioner doctorate. It's a terminal degree, but it's for people that have industry background but want to teach full time. And that was very appealing to me. And my advisor, a guy named Richard Lutz, who's a genius in the brand space, took me in, and we worked very closely together and really helped me make that transition into full-time academia. At the same time, Georgia Tech was calling, and it ended up, again, right place, right time, and you just never know how these things are going to fall out. So what was a low point for me in terms of Emory and them saying, okay, we're going to change direction, and you're kind of just an adjunct, and we're not going to use you, really turned into a motivating factor for me to move on into going and doing this and making a commitment to it. And now, here I'm very happy here at Georgia Tech.
Wow. I remember talking to you when you were at Emory, and how they were transitioning to that, which, again, brand nerds, it's going to sound like I'm taking a shot at Emory, but if analytics are only important as it relates to the brands that they help. So to go full force into that, in my opinion, doesn't make sense. But what do I know? I'm not in academia. But it's really interesting the way you talk about, that's really making lemonade out of lemons, right? What you did. And now you're at arguably a much better place than you ever would have been if they didn't throw those lemons at you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, they've kind of come back a little bit from where they were. But at the time, you get mad at these kind of things,
Sure.
right? You have setbacks in your career, and it was not, my happiest time. But like I said, it's how you choose to respond, I think. And again, use it as a motivating factor.
Yep. And I just want to say one thing, D, and I'll throw it to you. I'm thrilled to be one of the people that Tim mentioned, because he's, as you said, he's brilliant and such a good human being. So it makes my heart happy that I played my small role. All we did was give him the opportunity, and he ran with it. So I just wanted to say that point.
Well, I think it's a little bit, you did a little bit more than that, brother, Larry. I appreciate the humility, but brand nerds, what you'll find throughout your career is you're going to have more bad bosses than good bosses.
Yep.
Just the reality. And it's not because folks want to be bad bosses. It's because most people get promoted and get more responsibility based on their performance as an individual contributor, not as a manager. And we promote these folks who are really good at doing a particular job, but they're not good at getting great work done through others. They can produce great work themselves, but it's a different ball game to get great work done through others. And so, LT, what you were able to do is identify Tim's talent, which you've talked to earlier, and then allow Tim the space to bring his talents forward. So I think that was a really big deal. And that is why Tim has acknowledged you as one of the people who has had the most influence on his career. So I just want to take a moment to say kudos, brother. Well done, Larry. Yeah, well
I'm proud
done,
of it. Proud of it.
Then the second thing, Tim, what year was it when Emory made the decision that they weren't going to do the adjunct?
2013, 2014, something
so
like that.
10 years ago. 10 years ago.
11
11 years ago now. 11 years. Okay. So
absolutely.
You've got high schoolers now. So they're teenagers. They're teenagers. So at the time, they're like under the age of 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got
my oldest is around 10 or 11.
Yeah, okay. So you got 3 kids, 10, 11, and younger. All right. So, and you're being told we're going in a different direction. You're being told, okay, so this is a very critical time for you and your family, Tim. Okay, so
Yeah.
my question to you is, why didn't you just say, okay, I'm going back to the corporate world? What made you stay the path on academia? Because you certainly could have gone
Great
back
question.
to do the regular corporate thing.
Yeah. That's a great question. And I should also add that at the time I was also, I was doing consulting, right? I've been doing consulting this
Okay.
whole time, right? So it was
Okay,
kind
yep.
of I kind of balanced the Tim Halloran income thing is, if you want to break it out, his income stream is both teaching and consulting. So obviously teaching took a hit, so I have to plug in more. I knew, I did 10 plus years at Coca-Cola, and I had done the corporate thing. With the politics and stuff. And again, there are some people that thrive in that environment, and I think they're more power to them. I knew it wasn't me. There were too many times where I was kind of trying to buck the system and push a little, and kind of do things that trying to be more innovative probably than I.
And I was a bad role model for Tim in bucking the system, but go ahead.
And I love to have flexibility, and part of it was a family, it was a lifestyle choice, right? I had my son at the time when I left Coke. Was one of the impetus for me leaving Coke to begin with was my son was 2-3 years old, and I wasn't seeing him that much. So just happened to be, and again, people can manage it. I'm sure that was again 20 years ago, 18 years ago. But I mean, and people can manage things differently these days. But for me, it was partially a lifestyle change. And I knew when I was at Coke and managing and like doing stuff with our interns that we would bring in for the summer at Coke and brand, and I would be running their training and running stuff with them. I found that I really have some passion for this. So I wasn't going to let it, DC, I will admit there was a time where I was like, screw this, screw academia, and I was on that kind of train. And then I think your true love will start calling back to you even if you take a break from it for a while. And that's what happened to me.
That's good, man. See, brand nerds, this is why we have Tim kicking off album 6. This is why we have him at the top of the year. That's so good, Tim. Larry, any follow-up for you before I go to the next question?
Oh, this is awesome.
All right, Tim. You're an accomplished person on both the corporate side and the academic side. You have many successes. Kudos on those successes. Larry went over all of those, and we hope it's making your mom proud. What's your mom's name, by the way, Tim?
Diane.
Diane with Miss Diane, Miss Halloran. We just want to say kudos to your son for all of his many successes. But now, Tim, we don't want to know about any of those for this question. We want to know.
I know where I'm going.
Your biggest F up, the big. I'm talking about the Stankonia being in Atlanta. Shout Outcast, the stanky one, and what you learned from it.
Yeah, there's plenty there. and so when I knew you guys may ask me this question, where to start, I thought, maybe I should talk about the time that we put too much food coloring in the Powerade Jagged Ice flavor, and there was issues. Whenever we got a call from the 1-800 hotline at Coca-Cola, you were in trouble. But I thought it's a Coke story, and it was actually my first experience as a brand manager. Right on Powerade, I'd kind of been an associate brand manager, but I was kind of taking the lead. And this is on the Cherry Coke brand. And let me give you just a minute or two of background so that your listeners can understand what's going on here. Was a few years prior to me being on the Cherry Coke brand, Coca-Cola made a very big strategic decision to take Cherry Coke out to replace. It was a line extension. So it was in the same graphics as Coca-Cola. It was on the same shelf set. It was in the contour bottle. And make it its own brand, okay? And changed Cherry Coke and put it in kind of a bottle that looks like the Dasani bottle today. It was out of that Coca-Cola contour bottle. They had these crazy graphics on it, and they gave me this brand to run. And first of all, it was a fun brand. Because it was like the whole idea was, hey, let's use this as a laboratory to kind of do crazy stuff on. The whole brand idea behind Cherry Coke was it was a different kind of cola. So the tagline was do something different. So kind of push the envelope. Of course, we were expected to push the envelope, but not a whole lot of marketing budget, right? So we couldn't do a lot. And this movement from the contour bottle on the Coke shelf to this other bottle that moved the brand down in a convenience store. Instead of being with all like the Coke and the Diet Coke, it was in another part of the cold vault with like Barks Root Beer, Mellow Yellow, Mr. Pibb.
Okay.
What do you guys, and by the way, in markets where we kind of created this plan where we would have model markets, and you would throw a bunch of money at like a Kansas City or a St. Louis to show, hey, if we market this brand, it's going to do well. And yes, where we marketed it, it did great. But that was only about 6% or 7% of the country, right? What do you think happened in the other 93% of the country where we didn't have any marketing? And we had moved it out of the Coca-Cola contour bottle on the Coke shelf into another place on the cold vault. What do you think happened?
Precipitous fall. Precipitous.
Oh, yeah. This is an easy.
People can't see it, but my hand is going down. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to give another analogy to explain what I would have guessed, and I certainly would have guessed this. In the famous movie Friday, there's a bully, okay, and his name is Debo. Okay, Debo is the bully in this movie Friday. And so if Debo has your back, you're good. If Debo does not have your back, you're in trouble. Coca-Cola and Diet Coke are like Debo. Okay, they can take care of everybody else. Y'all decided to move away from Debo, and you got smashed.
Right.
So great analogy, fantastic, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
We figured this out, right? You do these annual planning process. We're showing all the data, and we sit in. So I put together this whole thing. And by the way, my job is kind of like, I'm the brand manager of Cherry Coke, but the right thing to do here was to say, look, you've got a choice to make. You can either put a lot more money behind this brand, and but by the way, we've shown it does well when you put money behind it, you put support behind it. Or if you can't do that, you need to put it right back into the contour bottle so it gets right back to where it needs to be. Okay, you need to make it a line extension again with Coke. So I presented this to my manager at the time, and my manager at the time was a pretty politically savvy guy at Coca-Cola. He was not going to rock the boat. He was gonna, he did not like rocking the boat at all.
Okay.
I come into his office and say to him, here's what we need to do. You would have thought that I had just, dropped a nuclear bomb there, because he kicked me out of his office so fast and to tell me that we would never, this is where by the way, DC, you mentioned politics, right?
Yes.
I got the line of, too many people have been working too hard on this to make this kind of a change.
Ooh.
And that was my first direct experience with the big corporation politics. I'd seen it and experienced it secondhand. I mean, Larry would take the brunt of it with Powerade, right? I was kind of under him, right? And I had another manager on what became Dasani bottled water, which is a whole other story. But where this leads up into what I should have done, right, is I had all the data, I had the information, and I should have gone, and I let it drop. And I was like, I let it drop, and I probably, and then when I brought it up again, I probably didn't bring it up in the right way. I should have come back with another more sophisticated analysis to kind of go in there and say, look, guys, this is not the right way to go. And I regret in my time at Coke not fighting the politics a little bit more and making me more frustrated. And I think, the idea is, it's a classic, you got to pick your battles. And 3 years after we presented that analysis, guess what Coca-Cola did?
Right back.
Yep.
Bam. It's a story of my life there. I would come up with these ideas and plans, and 2 and 3 years later is when they they went off and kind of be executed. Bottled water took it 2 or 3 years later to launch. The Cherry Coke back in the contour bottle took 2 or 3 years. I did it when I was on Fresca. We did this Fresca thing where we were kind of repositioning it as a boomer drink and even considering it, making it having alcohol in it. 10 years later they did that. So, so I think to kind of circle around this story, I mean, I think when you have the data and you have the information and you got to you got to have the confidence to go in there and push back and be aggressive and facts will win. But sometimes the politics can get in the way as well.
Ooh, this is a good one, D.
What a story.
Yeah.
What a story. Go ahead, LT.
So, Tim, I just want to make sure I've got this straight. So when you went in to your boss, you said, look, man, we either have to invest like we've done in Kansas City and St. Louis, again, making up if those are the markets, and do that, or if we're not willing to do that, you just got to put this back into the contour bottle and have it just be in line extension. That was what your recommendation was.
That was the idea. It was either one or the other.
Right.
And I also feel bad because I had an intern that summer, and he really wanted to tackle that too. And so he indirectly made it part of his intern project, which presented to the same manager. That didn't go over well either.
Oh, yeah, you're not listening to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, D, I have to add this, and then I want to throw it to you. Brand nerds, I'm going to put a hypothesis in here. And Tim, I won't tell the full story, but you'll remember. Well, actually, it might have even been before you came. But one of the things when you're at a place, any place, whether it's Coca-Cola, P&G, or Google, they're very political. And lots of times, the senior executives and the middle managers have bonuses that are predicated on certain things that you may or may not know about. Most of the times you might not know about it. And so Tim's manager might have had his or her bonus predicated on whether Cherry Coke as an individual brand entity, how well it did. So that was going to drive that decision because it was tied to that manager's bonus. Even if it was, as D, we talk about this all the time, even if it wasn't right for the business, because Tim is all about, he was just saying, here's what's right for the business. And there's many times that you're going to encounter that. And whenever you can, you need to try and find out what's your manager's bonus and or stock options or whatever predicated upon, so you understand what you're walking into.
And LT, I mean, that's a great point. And I think that's great. I mean, I did not do that. I mean, I didn't know what I just was trying to, and I think the other thing you got to think about when you're a brand manager, you are so laser focused on your brand. And you should be, that's your job, but you don't necessarily, and as you advance in an organization, and I saw this when I kind of had multiple brands under me, you have to intentionally think of things much more broadly and that's one thing I preach to my students. You got to think about it as a portfolio. My analogy is, hey, you got multiple brands. It's like a basketball team, right? You got your 5 players and you got your defensive players, you got your shooters, you got different guys, and they each play to have different roles. You got to think about it in terms of that as well. And Cherry Coke its role in our portfolio was, we'll get a little volume on it. We'll get some school volume on it.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, it's our learning lab. So anything, and Tim, go crazy with it, right? Go this thing called the internet. Go figure out the internet and how we can use the internet to market our brands. Cherry Coke had the first internet promotion at Coca-Cola, and then the Cokes and the Sprites of the world. Once it was kind of deemed, it kind of did okay for Cherry Coke. Let's learn from that. And so it was really a learning lab. And that's what the role of the brand was.
Right. But keep that goddamn contour bottle.
All right. Okay. So Larry and Tim, this story pisses me off. And it does so because you, Larry, said Tim's manager and maybe others had their bonuses and compensation attached to the performance of Cherry Coke. Well, Tim had the data that said, this thing's going down in a hurry where we're not supporting it. And unless we pony up X amount of tens of millions of dollars in marketing investment, this thing's going to keep going down. So what that says to me, Tim and Larry, is that volumetrically, this thing was going down. So that would go against the very notion of some performance-based metric, which means this thing was political, because what Tim said is,
Yep.
Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead. About to say something?
Well, unless that, because by the way, our group was the flavors group.
Right.
That probably, if it switches into Coke, guess what
Right.
happens to the brand? It goes back into the Coca-Cola
Right.
brand.
Ah, okay. Great point.
That's where I was going.
That's where you're going, okay.
It could be political, yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Great point.
But I don't know.
Sorry, Larry.
No, that's where I was going, because that manager was going to be, compensated or looked upon about how Cherry Coke as a brand entity did. And if it got pushed back, to Tim's point, to the Coca-Cola brand group, he or she would have failed, and that would have made that person look bad.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
I don't know. We can hypothesize. I don't know. All I know is I was kicked out of the office.
So to me, well, I wasn't there, but I'm gonna hazard a guess, because the person said there's so many people who have worked so long. That makes it political, not performance.
That's an excellent point, DC. And I was told that. Yes.
Okay. So to me, it's more political. So now, brand nerds, what do you do when that happens? What do you do when you walk into your manager's office? You have data backing you up. You know that the decision that had been made is not the right decision, and you are unceremoniously tossed out of the office for reasons that are not business-based. I'm going to recommend that you consider a yes and strategy. Yes and. So Tim's my manager. I come in, I present this information, not Tim, because Tim would have taken it and say, oh, wow, we got to change this. But let's just say Tim's more political than he is performance-based. Tim then says, get out of my office, because so many people have done too much. And I go, yes, Tim. And if we keep going the way we're going, in the next 6 months, not only will we know this isn't working, the entire company is going to know this isn't working, including the bottlers. And let's not put this team in that position 6-8 months from now. Let's deal with it now, so that we're seen as proactive in recognizing this and turn it around. Now, I'm not saying that would work, brand nerds or Tim or Larry. I'm just saying a yes and strategy might be useful. Then I want to tell a story. Okay, so Tim, you mentioned Cherry Coke as a learning lab. And I don't know, Larry, if I've told you this story before or not, but Tim, I certainly haven't shared this with you. Well, at the Coca-Cola company, everything not called Coca-Cola is a learning lab. Okay. Right. Okay. At least when we were there, I don't know about now, but when we were there, that was the deal. So today, brand nerds, you all may or may not know, Coca-Cola Zero is the biggest performing brand in the last 50 years for the Coca-Cola company. It's one of 3 or 4 things in the last 50 years of the Coca-Cola company that you point to as a roaring success, Coca-Cola Zero. But before it was launched, my manager, who will remain unnamed, said to me, I want you to consider launching a Sprite Zero first as a learning lab for Coke. Oh, wow. Okay. Yep. Okay. So I was asked to consider this. All right. So I considered it for about a nanosecond, and I didn't do shit. Okay. I didn't do anything. All right. I did not ask for any research. I did not do anything. So now months go by. Okay. And so my manager's asking, hey, where are we on this thing? And I was like, we're nowhere on this thing. And he was like, what? What do you mean we're nowhere on this? And I said, the consumer profile of Coca-Cola is not the same as Sprite. We have mostly a multicultural audience. We like sweet shit. We're not drinking this diet shit. Oh, sorry, my customer. We're not drinking this. So to do that, while it might be a wonderful learning lab for Coke, it would be terrible, using my Charles Barkley parlance, terrible for my brand. So no, I considered it. I said, no. Do you know, I caught so much heat for that. I was branded as a maverick.
Malcontent.
Malcontent. It was written up in my review as And you know what? I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
No.
I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. But to your point, Tim and Larry, you guys know this, because of politics. In this case, it was politics and performance. They wanted to protect the flagship brand, so I get that. But I wasn't going to allow them to. I know we're in the question of f up my brand to try to learn something for Big Daddy Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Can't stand this stuff. Okay.
This is great conversation, Tim. That's a really good one, dude. Really good one.
That's a really good one. All right, Larry, next one, bro.
All right, Tim. So regarding technology marketing, with your great background and also happen to be at a place called Georgia Tech, can you tell us where you think marketers should lean in or best leverage tech, or areas that you think they should be leery or simply avoid?
My advice and counsel, great question on this, is put it in its proper perspective. And I see this all the time, especially at a place, where technology is the impetus, is use it in the right way. It is a tool, period. It is a tool, an additional tool for us. Remember, I was talking about those relationships that brands and consumers have with one another. All technology is another channel or another way to enhance that consumer and brand relationship. You still have to know about what the consumer is all about. You still have to know what the consumer's needs are. You still have to find that sweet spot that your brand is going to appeal to that consumer. Now, in our day and age, right, it was all about TV, radio, and print. It was about screaming from the mountaintop. We need this media way. We're going to tell you how great our brand is. What technology, and I'm specifically referring to things like social media, in terms of engagement in social media, what it enables us to do now is have, instead of us just dominating and shouting from the market, from the mountaintop, it now becomes a two-way conversation. So for brand people, you got to think of your consumer even more in a relational mode. You are now having a conversation with them because they can talk back, they can share, they're contributing creatively with Instagram post or Snapchat post or whatever. But it still gets back to the idea of engagement being, engagement is kind of the new metric, right? And it still gets back to you creating a bond with a consumer and leveraging technology as a means to further that relationship. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I love this. What do you think, D?
There's nothing new under the sun. We've talked about this before, and in this case, it's a bit like the relationship between brands and humans are becoming more similar to relationships between humans and humans. That's what's happening. And so, Tim, your point of now consumers can talk back, they can engage, they can share. These are all of the things that have been a part of human relationships for millennia.
Right.
And now what's happening is these same kinds of relational dynamics are taking place between brand and humans.
Yep.
But there's a problem that happens when this goes wrong, is when humans who run brands think that the brands belong to them rather than that brand belonging to the consumer. This is where this thing goes pear-shaped.
Yes.
And it's a simple concept, Tim, LT, but man, so many brands forget this to their peril.
Yep. D, we say this a lot. The brands own the IP, but the consumer, or in the B2B case, the customer, really do own the brands, because if the brands go sideways, they get called on it. And I was just looking at some for work that we're doing, the Peloton brand, and how all the difficulties they've had. And in 2019, they did an ad where a very woman who was very thin, attractive, she was given a gift from her husband of a Peloton. And, it looked as if the way, and this is what happens, brand nerds, when you're too close to something sometimes. From the way people responded, and I saw it this way too, it looked as if the husband said, "Hey, wife, I've got a great gift for you, and you better keep your ass on that Peloton." You know, that was the underlying message that people got, and they got this huge pushback to it. And you know what their response was? Well, I'm sorry if you misunderstood it. No, 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 no.
No.
That's not the way it works.
No.
What you need to do as a brand is the exact opposite of Peloton. Say, our bad. We messed up and we own it and we're sorry. Because when you do it this way, you know, it really goes sideways. We've gone a little sideways from the technology point, but D, I wanted to make that point to your point about the brand and who owns it, because I think that's really important.
Totally agree. And I think just to kind of close this idea out is that we you know, I did a paper, kind of an offshoot of my dissertation, and it's getting back to kind of measurement, and then that you still want to kind of measure these technology things, engagement, and
Right.
understanding, being authentic. The measuring the type of engagement, what we basically did was we used a local, national chain with a loyalty program, and we're able to kind of connect people's loyalty with that chain with their social media engagement.
Okay.
And we did a fancy analysis that showed, do any types of engagements predict future purchase intent? And we looked at what, you know, if people made a positive comment, if they made a negative comment, if they shared it, if they liked it, if they loved it. If you on Facebook, you could put all these little like emoji kind of things on, you know, heart, you know, besides the heart, wow, laughing, whatever. And basically we said, is there a way to tell, did any of these engagements work? And believe it or not, we saw that there were a few that helped drive or predict increased purchases. Can you guess on what they might be?
No.
Okay.
Heart.
A heart, LT. That is the only emoticon. I mean, DC. That's the only emoticon that drove purchase intent. If someone went over, instead of just clicking the like, went over and let the heart pop up and clicked on the heart, that drove future purchase intent. The others were a positive comment. If someone made a positive comment, took the time to make a comment, again, engaging, hey, love this, blah, 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 this new menu item, they were predicted, we showed that they were going to be future buyers. And if they made a negative comment, obviously they were gone.
Right.
But guess what? Likes didn't mean a thing. You know, we always talk social media, right, back to technology, measurements, or how many likes did you get? Well, guess what likes do? Likes mean nothing. Likes don't mean anything in terms of actual sales. So the other thing, besides it just being a tool, an engagement tool, is we need to figure out ways to measure engagement. And if you can figure out ways to measure engagement and get the right types of engagement in terms of your social media, you become that much more stronger.
Well, and also to measure engagement that actually is connected to purchase. That's
important engagement, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Do you want to go to the next question?
I do. Tim, what are you most proud of?
Gosh, you know, well, I'll say personally, I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my my wife and kids.
Please give everyone a shout out. Everyone, please.
In my family, my wife is Nancy, who's been putting up with me for now 29 years. If you can believe that. And then I have a 21-year-old son who is a junior at Villanova University, where he is a swimmer on the Division I men's Villanova swim team. And I have twin girls who are juniors in high school and right in the middle of starting that whole college search process. And they are big dancers, so they're the apple of my eye. So, and we have a dog named Gus. So that's our crew. So, but yeah, that's kind of the obviously that's first and foremost. But you know, career wise, I look back to my time at Coke, obviously very positively. I feel like I did push the envelope. I won an award, innovation award, for some stuff we did on Cherry Coke. We won that kind of the innovation award of the year and did some cool stuff. Writing the book was a big thing for me. I was really, you know, the idea of writing, romancing the brand, and being accepted and even winning a couple of awards is something I'm proud of. And then
It's still available on Amazon, Brand Nerds.
yes, it is.
Go check it out.
Yeah, I still use it in some of my classes as well. And then getting that doctorate degree after what I mentioned to you earlier with Emory and that kind of stuff, and you know, completing that play, making, you know, kind of staying with it. It wasn't easy. It was a distance program, or we would go down there, and it was a 3-year haul, but doing that and then capping it off with this paper that I just told you about, which kind of completed the journey in a way, because it won the paper of the year for the Journal of Interactive Marketing. So it was like,
oh, wow.
Okay, I know he at least knows a little bit of how to do this stuff. Not much, but he knows a little bit of it. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
That's a lot to be proud of, D, you know, and
it is.
It's for me, I have I'm going to use a Yiddish word, nothing but nachas, which means that I saw this young man when he was a young man, and to see him become what he's become is makes me so proud that I had my little part of that, and I'm really proud of you, bud. Really, you've done it.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
We had fun.
Yes.
Nice. Nice. All right, OT, ready to hit the next section, brother?
Let's do it. Okay, Tim. So you know, you as a listener of the program, you know what this is. What's popping?
What's popping,
D? What's popping, Tim?
What's popping?
So, Tim, to our brand nerds out there, there's our chance to shout out, shout down, or simply air something happening in and around marketing today that we think is good fodder for discussion. And Tim, I know you have a good one, so I'm throwing it to you.
Yeah, okay. So I thought about this a little bit, and you guys remember when we were in graduate school, and I'm going to use my academic, my professorial and my experience, what I'm seeing with students today.
Yep.
When we were in graduate school, everybody wanted to go work at Coca-Cola.
Yep.
Everyone wanted to go work at P&G. Crap. Yep. The CPG companies were where it was at.
Yep.
And guess what? That's not the case anymore.
Not anymore.
Nope.
It's Google, it's Amazon, it's Apple, it's any tech company out there, you know, Tesla, wherever. That's where it is. The best and the brightest. And then this is not, you might say, oh, Tim, you're at Georgia Tech. Of course. No. When I talk to colleagues and at other schools, no, it is about tech. They all want to go work at the big tech companies. And, you know, and I wondered, you know, what has made the CPG companies and, you know, lose a little bit of their luster. And I'm trying to figure out what happened. And is it just that tech is so sexy, that tech is where it's at? You know, that's where all the growth is, the news. But, you know, what happened to going and working at the Coca-Cola company or Pepsi or Kraft or P&G or Nike, even, right? Some of these other places.
Wow. D, I knew you'd like this one. What's your reaction to that?
That's a great one. Tim and Brand Nerds, Larry, Jeff, and I talk about this from time to time. So giving some context to your excellent What's Poppin' question, Brand Nerds, I'm going to read for you the top 10 brands globally based on brand value from a source called Interbrand. So here are the top 10, all of which Tim has mentioned. 1 Apple, 2 Microsoft, 3 Amazon, 4 Google, 5 Samsung, 6 Toyota, 7 Benz, 8 Coca-Cola, 9 Nike, and 10 BMW. All right. So there's only 1 CPG in the top 10 today, where in this same study, you know this, Larry and Tim, for the first 12 to 14 years of the Interbrand brand value. So when they started it, Coke was number 1 every year. Okay, so that's just giving some quantitative backing to what you're saying, Tim. All right, so what are we to do? What's changed? Well, today, those companies that I listed, especially all those in tech, they're the largest companies in the world in terms of market cap right now. So when you start to think about what are the biggest in a particular domain, that's it. When we were coming up, CPG as a category was a sexy category.
Yep.
Today, tech is the sexy category. So that's one reason why I think people are flocking to these tech companies. But I will say this, and maybe I'm the old man on a horse when people are driving cars. But I will say this: of those 10 brands that I just mentioned, and many of that Tim, only one of those brands is truly something that is a want that by the skill of the marketing can be converted into a need. Only one. Okay. You're not doing any work today without a computer. You're not doing anything without a mobile phone. Okay. You have to have that. You got, so that's Apple and Microsoft. You got to shop for stuff. Okay. So this is Amazon and Samsung. Most folks in this country, unless you live in a densely populated area with a very nice public transit like New York, you got to have a car. Okay, you got to have a car. So that takes care of Toyota, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW. And most of us got to wear clothes. So that's Nike or shoes. You might decide not to wear Nike. Maybe you wear Adidas or something like that. But you got to wear shoes, okay? No one needs to drink a Coca-Cola. Yeah. We can drink water and be just fine. Some would argue you would be better. So my pitch to those that are considering where to go now, absolutely tech is the sexy industry. But if you really want to learn how to market from a consumer perspective and how to psychologically convince someone that thinks, I don't really need this thing, I just want it, and then that be replaced with, oh, now I need it, Coca-Cola is not a bad place to start. So that's my response.
Tim, I'd love to hear your point of view on this.
I think, yeah, and only, in a perfect world, we're trying to create both, and Apple has done this well, right? Emotional and functional kind of benefits and create brand personality.
They do it great.
They do a fantastic job. The others, as Dee said, right? It's some are just plain, I have to have these things, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think Coca-Cola is still the one place that you really have to, you are forced to create a brand persona that I can relate to, that I can, it's that it says something about me, what I am drinking, it's a badge, right? And being able to align yourself with that makes for some really fun, engaging, sexy kind of marketing. And I don't think that's walked away. I think maybe they've lost their way a little bit in the last few years, but I think there's the potential is always there.
Yep. So my 2 cents is, I love this topic, by the way.
I do too. And
Tim, I'm sure a lot of students come to you for career advice, I'm gathering, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I would love to hear even more after I finish my quick thing. I would suggest I would add Nike to that list, D, because anybody can have any kind of clothes, but they've done an incredible job of emotionally connecting with folks to get them to wear their stuff, to wear their shoes.
Oh,
right?
I absolutely agree with that. But my point, Larry, I'm sorry, was one has to wear clothes, though.
No,
one never has to consume a coat.
No, I got you. No, I totally get you. But here's the point. I think what we're all landing on is great, work in tech, but you know what would be great for your career? Go work at a Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Again, we all worked at Pepsi or another CPG that you're going to really learn the fundamentals. And if you know the fundamentals, you're going to take it to a whole other level. If you look at the people who are the best at what they do, from sports to anything, they know the fundamentals. Michael Jordan's the best. Again, I think Michael's better than LeBron, but LeBron's amazing. But you know why those two guys are great? They have athleticism, they have all the things, but they're great fundamentally. They're so fundamentally sound. Yeah. So if you're thinking about being the best marketer, you know what? The best point you might want to do is go work at a CPG for the first few years. And we all know the way the world works today, people don't work at the same company for a while. Cut your teeth there And then you'll be that much more adept if you want to go then move into a big, a place like Amazon or a big tech company or a startup. Because if you go to a startup, then you really have the fundamentals that you can take to a whole other place. So Tim, I would love to hear what your thoughts about that.
I think that's a great point of view. And to that end, even when if you go to one of these places, because at the end of the day, the brand manager at Apple is Tim Cook, right? At the end of the day,
Yes.
you're going to be, if you go marketing for Apple, you're going to be in charge of, third quarter promotion on this product or whatever.
That's right.
But if you go to a CPG place, what I always say is, don't be afraid to work on the smaller brands.
Yes.
When I was at Coca-Cola, I intentionally avoided brand Coke.
So
I
did
didn't
I.
want to work on it. Why?
Yeah.
Because I would only see a small little slice of the big picture. I was much more content in new products or on Sherry Coke or what we did on Powerade, right?
Yep.
It was, you saw the whole business and you had so much more autonomy. The amount of autonomy you could have at a Coca-Cola, but you had so much more autonomy when you were working on smaller brands. And I thought it was a better learning experience, to be honest with you.
That's a great point. And that's why D went to Sprite. That was his goal from day one.
Yeah.
I wanted no parts of Coca-Cola, no parts whatsoever.
No. I mean, God bless the people that work on it. It's great, and you get a lot of exposure when you're working on the big brands, and different strokes for different strokes for different folks. But it wasn't for me.
Right. So Tim, going back, so when these students come to you, is that the kind of advice you give them if they're asking you for a white paper, or does it depend on the kid?
Yeah, it's just going to depend on it's almost like a one-on-one with a consumer, right? It's like, what are their strengths? What are they interested in? How do we, what do they want to do? And then, if they say, I say, both, if they want to go work at a CPG place or whatever, and they say, well, should I work on a big brand or a small brand? I basically tell them what I just told y'all, right? I mean, there are upsides and downsides to each of that. Right. But I really enjoyed my time, and I think to see a holistic, I mean, remember, LT, we had P&L responsibility on Power.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was it was a really holistic understanding of the business.
Totally. Oh boy, this is good.
I wish I'd heard this discussion that we're having now, the whole podcast, when I was in grad school and considering where to go, or when I was coming into thinking about entry-level jobs. Where do I go? I wish I had this kind of information to inform my decision.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah. And guys, this is incredible, but we're at the show close, man. I mean, Tim, I expected this show to be awesome, and it's been better. You've been amazing, dude. Just amazing. Awesome. We're going to share our learnings now. I'm going to start off, and I have a bunch, but I'm going to cull them down. So I've got 5. Jeff will be happy. So number 1.
Jeff will be happy.
So brand nerds, if you don't have a grand plan for your career, it's all right. Just like Tim did, do your job with dedication and excellence, and let's see what happens from there. That's number 1. Number 2, the best brands are experiential through all senses and must be authentic. Think about Tim's Disney, Miami Dolphins, Atlanta Braves examples. Number 3, brand nerds, life. You're going to get knocked down. And like Tim did with his situation at Emory, it is how you get up and respond to this adversity that matters. The true making lemonade out of lemons. Number 4, like Tim did when he was running the intern program at Coca-Cola, and he realized that he had a passion for teaching, tap into your true passion, and when you find it, seize it. And number 5, the last one, as Tim said, tech is great. And as long as you see it as a tool to strengthen relationships with your brand, it is still about connecting your brand. Unlike many folks here in Silicon Valley who get so enamored with the tech and then they try and shoehorn the tech into something. No, it's got to come from the brand first and go from there. Those are my 5, and great 5, Tim.
Phenomenal 5.
Yeah, it's great.
Tim, I've enjoyed knowing you through the years. When we worked together, seeing you in a hallway or in a meeting, I often had a smile on my face thinking about you and as a marketer and as a human. And I rooted for you. Yeah, I rooted for you. I wanted the things that you worked on to be successful because I thought this is a person who's earned it. And if the more successful this person is, the more that it communicates organizationally, inside and outside, that you can do really well and be a really good human at the same time. So I hold you in very high regard, Tim.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And I'm thankful that you have blessed us today with your presence. So as you may or may not know, during these podcasts, at this part of it, I make an attempt to better understand who is this person in front of me and what is it that they bring to this planet that is uniquely theirs to bring. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not clairvoyant, but sometimes something will hit me and I just need to share it. So I like to do that with you. And I find these things even more interesting when it's people that I know. And so I'm going to make that attempt now with you, Tim. First, I'm going to go to a decision you made earlier of getting an MBA versus a specialized area. So you could have done an MBA. You decide you were going to go to specialized area and do research and sciences at UGA. This was a pivotal decision for you because that then led to the next thing, which is you got a research intern. You got a research internship, and then that led to brand management. Now, because you decided a specialist degree versus an MBA, you could have just been on the research path, but it ended up being the second versus, which is a research path versus a brand management path. All right. And then finally, here you are at Emory, now in the world of academia, and they say to you, you know what, we don't want to do the adjunct professor thing anymore. We're going a different direction. Nothing personal, Tim, but we're going a different direction. And then that led to you going to Georgia Tech. So you had an Emory University adjunct opportunity versus a Georgia Tech full-time opportunity. I know you do your consulting thing as well, have been doing it for many years, and you now have a PhD. You know, a PhD. And when I asked you what it was like at that time for you to make the decision to stay on the academic path when you had a 2-year-old son, you said, I wasn't spending that much time with him. And I also had this sense of the whole political thing or corporate thing. I knew it wasn't me. You also talked about how, hey, don't ignore the little things. And the reason why you said don't ignore the little things is because MBA and specialized master's degree are pretty freaking close. You just happen to pick the other side. A research path and brand management are pretty close. You just happen to pick the other side. And Emory and Georgia Tech are both here in Atlanta. Okay, they're both here in Atlanta, same city. So they too are pretty close. You just happen to pick the other side after Emory opportunity went away, which then leads me to this. Napoleon Hill is one of my favorite authors. And one of his books is 3 Feet from Gold. And for those brand nerds who are not familiar with this book, I'll just give you a quick version of this thing. It's like a parable. So there's a guy who goes out west seeking gold and fortune. He finds a place out west and he finds a little gold and he goes, wow, if I had the right equipment, I could mine this gold and be wealthy beyond belief. So he tells his people, he stops, he marks the place, he goes back home, he gets investment from his family and friends. They give him the equipment. He goes back out to the place. He then starts to dig dry. It dries up. He gets a little gold, but not enough. He's still digging, no gold. So he gives up. He sells his land, his plot, and his equipment to someone else. That person then does some research and finds that the vein was 3 feet away from where this prior owner was digging, the vein. So they move over 3 feet, and all of the wealth and riches that would have been available to the first person went to the second owner, and it was 3 feet away.
Wow.
It was 3 feet away. Which then leads me to this. This is what I think you are, Tim Halloran. And your life and career has suggested this. You are the 3 feet from gold brand guy. Okay, that's you. You have been 3 feet from gold at major inflection points throughout your life and career, and somehow you did not give up. And because you were only 3 feet away, you stayed in the game and you found your way to the gold. Or in some cases, Larry said, I got gold over here. And you said, yep, I'm going to come over here for the gold. So I would say to the brand nerds, to your students and others, pay attention to someone who is actually a 3 feet from gold brand guy, because they may be able to learn from you how to be closer to their gold mine when it's 3 feet away.
Like that. I love that analogy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, only DC could do this, man.
Yeah,
You know?
no,
And,
it's
and
very
it's like
insightful.
perfect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Keep
Oh,
digging,
that's
right?
awesome,
Or
dude.
get closer. Get within 3 feet. Yeah.
That's right.
And you get there, which is not a small thing. Those 3 feet are the hardest feet, and you do it. So yes,
Wow.
that's something about you. Okay, so Tim, before we sign off, what have you learned from this wonderful conversation with us today?
Well, you guys are great. I mean, I have admired both of y'all throughout my career and looked to, I mean, and by the way, DC, you guys are both. I mentioned the Sprite repositioning story as a classic example of repositioning every single
you.
class I teach, because there is no
Thank
better.
you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tim.
Larry, I have so many Powerade stories that I share.
That's great.
You probably would add, you probably could add a whole lot of more context even to what I provide. So you guys have been really, I'm blessed to kind of have known both of you guys. I just think, we don't do this enough. I mean, we don't do this conversations talking about reminiscing, but also talking about how it applies today and
Yes.
and how the lessons that we have. And all I'm trying to do when I'm teaching folks is, some of the discussions we've had today, just how do you take what our experience and looking back, and it's now the years are adding up, guys.
Yep.
They are.
Looking back,
They
and
are.
how do you use that to benefit mankind, at least in my perspective, benefits students. And you guys, I mean, this is, I'll just tell everybody, and it'll be required listening. We need for my students to come in. I'm going to start making this podcast become required listening, because I think you guys touch on so many great areas that and especially the what's popping. I think it's great to talk about current events, but also from the context of people that have done it. And I think that's what's really beneficial about these kind of conversations.
Yeah, no, thank you. We appreciate that. And again, to the brand nerds out there, what we're all three saying is, those brand nerds, as you're early in your career, it's great to cut your teeth on the CPGs of the world, and then go out and do your thing. And you'll have the fundamentals down, and that's a beautiful way to go. So that's a way to put a bow on it. Oh man. Thank you so much, Tim. Jade, I'm going to the close. Thanks for listening to Brands, Beats, and Bytes. The executive producers are Jeff Shirley, Daryl D.C. Cobbin, Larry Taman, Haley Cobbin, Jake Tate, and Tom Dioro.
The Podfather.
That is he. And if you do like this podcast, please subscribe and share. And for those on Apple Podcasts, if you are so inclined, we love those excellent reviews. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we look forward to next time, where we will have more insightful and enlightening talk about marketing.